Hello and welcome to another edition of Sophos Video News. I'm John Shier, and today we're talking about the Yahoo breach. So if you recall, back in September, there were 500 million user accounts that were stolen from Yahoo. And it appears that as of yesterday, another 1 billion accounts were also removed from the possessions of Yahoo. Now, the actual total number of accounts is probably somewhere between that 500 million and 1.5 billion user accounts breached, because there seems to have been some overlap between the two breaches. However, it probably skews towards the higher number of accounts that were breached. Who's behind this? Well, it's tough to say. Yahoo's saying these were nation-state attacks. Some others who have actually looked at the data are saying that these are extremely capable Eastern European hackers. As usual with something like this, with any attacks on the internet, it's very difficult to provide attribution. And as such, this is really the case here because this is an ongoing investigation involving law enforcement, and so the details are still relatively thin as far as the rest of the public is concerned. So what was stolen? Well, there were names, there were passwords, telephone numbers, knowledge-based authentication questions, those security questions that you fill out basically in case you need to recover your account, birth dates, and crucially, backup email addresses. And out of those email addresses, apparently there's quite a few, some say as many as 150,000 US government and military personnel email addresses. So you can imagine with all of that information, these people are probably at a much higher risk for some kind of impersonation or targeted phishing campaigns. So why do these mega breaches keep on happening? Well, one of the possible reasons is two things, an equal measure probably of negligence and technical debt. Well, what's technical debt? Well, that's when a large organization that's been around for quite some time and probably has grown through acquisition accumulates a lot of systems that age over time. And those systems themselves may not be getting updated as frequently as they should, or is being swapped out as frequently as they should. And so they kind of linger as part of some of the legacy services that are around in the infrastructure. And through either lack of resources or just lack of will, these systems never get replaced, and often offer attackers a point of entry in the network. And the negligence part comes from the fact that too many companies still haven't done the basic security hygiene of protecting their users and customers' data by using very simple things like strong encryption. So what's an organization to do? Well, if you're collecting PII, or personally identifiable information, you need to ensure that you're doing at least the bare minimums of encrypting that data with strong modern encryption. If you're collecting user authentication data, you need to make sure that you're taking due care with that authentication data as well. That means taking the password database, salting, hashing, and stretching it. As a matter of fact, at Naked Security, we've got a great article written by Paul Ducklin which explains exactly how you can do this, and we'll put a link in the notes of this particular video to that. Now, what happened at Yahoo is it seems that they didn't do enough of this preventative security controls, and they didn't put these in place soon enough, at least back in 2013 when these breaches occurred. And unfortunately, these breaches, like I say, were only announced this year in 2016, but there's some evidence that Yahoo knew about them back in around 2014, at least for one of those breaches. So for at least a year, there was a period of breach there that Yahoo had no idea who was running around their network and stealing their data. So, as a matter of fact, when we talk about the password database, it appears that Yahoo was only using MD5, which is a deprecated algorithm for hashing your passwords, especially if you're only doing, let's say, one loop of MD5. This particular hashing algorithm was demonstrated to have collisions back in like 1996 and officially declared broken basically in 2008. They also had included these security questions, as I mentioned earlier, some of them in unencrypted format. So these two things really led to this perfect storm of being able to steal useful data from the company. On top of this, there was some source code stolen for the authentication tokens, which means that the adversaries, in this case the attackers, were able to actually log on to users' accounts without even needing the passwords. They were able to craft these authentication tokens in a way that allowed them to unfettered access to these email addresses, these inboxes, right? So what comes to mind right away is how much potential information was actually stolen from these inboxes during the time of this breach period. And also what comes to mind is how many of the subsequent phishing and targeted attacks, as well as other breaches, actually came from the data that was stolen from Yahoo back in 2013. Now, it's worth reminding to the viewers that the stronger your password, the more resilient it is against crackers. So even if the password database does get stolen, a strong password is going to be tougher to crack if it's long and strong and unique. So if you're not reusing it against at other sites, then that password cannot be used to perpetrate additional fraud against you. So organizations, what can you also do? Well, obviously, protecting the password data is important in the way that we've outlined, but that's no excuse for actually protecting the network itself. Now, knowing your baseline is something that I think is really important. Understanding what a normal day looks like in your network, and then that way you're better able to spot any sort of anomalies that occur throughout the network. This is also where things like restricted account privilege, comprehensive auditing, network segregation, and aggressive network filtering, meaning only the hosts that need to talk to each other from, let's say, privileged areas of the network to less privileged areas of the network can do so. All of these things together can really lead you to be more resilient against one of these attacks. Not only do we want to prevent the intrusions in the first place, but we also want to make it much more difficult for these attackers to exfiltrate the data, and furthermore, exfiltrate useful data. So if all of that data is encrypted in a way that is practically useless, then you've gone a long way to protect all of your users' PII and all of their password data. The other thing that's missing in this whole puzzle is the concept of people, processes, and things. And in a lot of these breaches, what frequently happens is one or more of these things usually fails. Basically, the tools are what detect, respond, and report automatically on all the events that are happening in your network. But there are certain things that machines are unable to detect, and that's where the people come in. These are the security pros that are reviewing the event data, that are looking at all of the events that are happening in your network from a security context, and then are able to correlate that data and really spot these anomalies that the machines can't detect. And then finally, the processes are what allow these people, sometimes, very often, these are frontline people, to communicate these events with the rest of the business. These include things like the security and risk teams, the business unit stakeholders, as well as other technical people within the organization that can help remediate these issues. So what are users to do now? Well, obviously, you need to reset all of your passwords, specifically the ones that are at Yahoo properties and the ones that you may have shared a password with those Yahoo properties. You want to turn on two-factor authentication on any of your accounts that support it, especially, again, if those accounts shared a password with your Yahoo accounts. Change your knowledge-based authentication questions, your security questions, again, for specifically the Yahoo accounts, but also any other accounts that shared those same questions. As a matter of fact, you can use a tactic that I use, which is put garbage in there. If it asks you what your first car was, you can randomly generate a string, paste it in there, and using a password manager, remember exactly what answer matches what question for which particular site. And finally, as with all of these large breaches where an enormous amount of personally identifiable information has been put out in the wild, it's imperative that users are extra vigilant for targeted phishing campaigns, impersonation scams, anything that might put you at greater risk online due to your information now being available. So that's pretty much it in a nutshell. If you want to follow more of this story, we have some great articles over at nakedsecurity.sophos.com. And as usual, please join us for some of our podcasts, such as the Techno and the Sophos Chat. And until next time, stay secure.